Hello everyone and welcome back to What Is, the channel where we unravel life's biggest questions, one perplexing topic at a time. Today we're diving into something so fundamental, so universal, it almost defies definition. We're talking about the very fabric of human experience. We're asking, what is music? It sounds simple, right? Music is, well, music. But try to pin it down. Is it just sound? Is a baby's cry music? Is the rhythmic thunk 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 of a washing machine a symphony in disguise? We've all been there, humming along to a particularly catchy laundry cycle. Just kidding, mostly. But seriously, music is so much more than mere noise. It's organized sound, yes, but also emotion, memory, culture, and connection. It's a language understood across borders, even when the lyrics are gibberish. It's the soundtrack to our lives, from the mundane to the magnificent, and exploring its true nature means going on a journey way, way back. So let's rewind the tape, or perhaps crack open a prehistoric drum, and explore the origins of this incredible phenomenon. Imagine, if you will, our very distant ancestors. They lived in a world without Spotify, without concert halls, without even a decent pair of noise-cancelling headphones. What did they have? The sounds of nature, rustling leaves, roaring beasts, the gentle babble of a stream, and their own bodies, heartbeats, footsteps, the rhythm of breathing, and likely their voices. The prevailing theory is that music didn't just appear one day, fully formed with violins and a conductor. No, it emerged gradually, probably in parallel with language, from basic vocalizations and rhythmic actions. Think about it. Early humans needed to communicate, to coordinate hunts, to warn of danger, and perhaps most importantly, to bond. Perhaps the first music was a rhythmic chant to rally the group before confronting a woolly mammoth. Or maybe it was a soothing hum to quieten a frightened child by the flickering firelight. Drummers and rhythm makers might have been the original hype men, getting everyone in sync for a coordinated attack. Alright team, on three. 1, 2, 3, stop. Evidence of this ancient start isn't just theoretical. We have actual artifacts. Dig up the right cave and you might find hollowed out bones with carefully drilled finger holes. The oldest undisputed musical instrument ever found is the Davia Baba flute, discovered in a cave in Slovenia, thought to be around 60,000 years old. It's made from a cave bear femur and has 4 holes. That's right, a cave bear's thigh bone. Just imagine the first jam session. Ugh, can you pass me the femur? This mammoth jawbone just isn't cutting it for the bass line. Later examples like the Holu-Fels flute from Germany, made from a swan bone and dating back 40,000 years, show increasingly sophisticated craftsmanship. These weren't just random etchings, they were deliberately crafted to produce sound. Our ancestors weren't just surviving, they were creating. They were finding beauty and meaning in organized noise. Why? Well, theories are abound. Some suggest it was a form of sexual selection, a way to display fitness and attract a mate, like a peacock's tail, but with a catchy tune instead of bright feathers. Hey there, Oog, check out my sweet bone flute solo. Impressed yet? Others propose it was crucial for social cohesion, helping groups to synchronize movements for hunting or defense, fostering a sense of community, or even inducing trance states for shamanic rituals. And let's not forget the sheer joy of it, the pure, unadulterated human desire to express, to connect, to simply make some noise that feels good. From these humble prehistoric beginnings, music began its long, fascinating journey through human history, evolving, adapting, and transforming with every passing epoch. Fast forward a few millennia, past the last ice age and the invention of agriculture, and we arrive at the great cradle of civilization. In ancient Mesopotamia, we find evidence of lyres and harps, incredibly complex instruments for their time, some even decorated with bull's heads, probably to inspire a sense of majestic power, not to indicate the instrument's preferred diet. We even have cuneiform tablets describing hymns, which scholars are still trying to decipher. Then there's ancient Egypt, where music was deeply intertwined with religion and daily life. Images of tomb walls show orchestras with harps, flutes, and percussion, suggesting that even in the afterlife, a good rhythm section was essential. But perhaps no ancient culture shaped our understanding of music more profoundly than the Greeks. Pythagoras, yes, that Pythagoras, the one with the triangles, also tinkered with vibrating strings and discovered the mathematical ratios behind musical intervals. Octaves, perfect fifths, perfect fourths, these weren't just arbitrary sounds, but elegant mathematical relationships. The Greeks believed that music had an ethos, influencing character and emotion. Play too much of a certain mode, and you might become effeminate. Play another, and you're a brave warrior. Which, when you think about it, puts a lot of pressure on your playlist choices. Are you listening to enough warrior mode music today? As empires rose and fell, music continued to adapt. In the medieval period, particularly in Europe, music became dominated by the church. Gregorian chant with its ethereal monophonic melodies filled cathedrals, aiming to elevate the spirit towards the divine. This era also saw a crucial development of musical notation. Before this, music was largely passed down orally, like a game of telephone across centuries. Imagine trying to learn a new song from a monk who just hums and gestures vaguely with his hands. No, Brother Bartholomew, that note is higher than the last one, not just louder. Notation was a game changer, allowing compositions to be preserved and performed consistently across time and space. Then came the Renaissance, a rebirth of art, science, and the human spirit. Music became more complex, with the rise of polyphony, where multiple independent melodic lines weave together. Madrigals, secular songs for multiple voices, flourished, often filled with witty lyrics and intricate harmonies. Composers were no longer just servants of the church, but artists in their own right, exploring new forms and expressions. The Baroque era, roughly from 1600 to 1750, was all about grandeur and extravagance. Think about dramatic contrasts, intricate ornamentation, and the emergence of the orchestra as a powerful ensemble. Giants like Johann Sebastian Bach crafting complex fugues and cantatas, and George Friedrich Handel with his majestic oratorios defined this period. It was music designed to impress, to move, and sometimes, frankly, show off. Following this came the classical period, a reaction to Baroque opulence, emphasizing clarity, balance, and structure. Haydn, Mozart, and the early works of Beethoven are the hallmarks here. Think elegant symphonies, precise sonatas, and concertos that showcase virtuosity. It was logical, refined, and often incredibly beautiful. But nothing stays neat and tidy for long. The Romantic era burst forth in the 19th century, prioritizing emotion, individualism, and dramatic expression. Beethoven, in his latter, more stormy works, really bridged this gap. Composers like Chopin poured their hearts and souls into piano pieces. Tchaikovsky orchestrated grand narratives, and Wagner created sprawling operas that were entire worlds in themselves. Music became a vehicle for intense personal feeling, often reflecting the turbulent political and social changes of the time. And then we hit the 20th century. Brace yourself, because this is where things get wild. The invention of recording technology, Edison's phonograph leading the charge, revolutionized music forever. For the first time, music wasn't just a live event. It could be captured, replicated, and distributed. No longer did you have to wait for a concert. You could bring the music into your home. This was arguably the single biggest game changer since musical notation. Suddenly, a wider audience could access a wider variety of sounds. Then came radio, democratizing music even further, beaming sounds into millions of homes. And with new technology came new sounds. The blues, born from the sorrows and resilience of African American communities, gave rise to jazz, a vibrant improvised art form that swept the globe. Then, in the mid 20th century, raw, rebellious energy exploded. Rock and roll, mixing blues, gospel, and country, shaking up the establishment and giving teenagers a soundtrack for their revolution. From there, it was an avalanche of genres: pop, folk, R&B, soul, hip hop, electronic dance, metal, punk, disco, country, reggae. The list is endless. The digital age, with MP3s and streaming services, has made virtually all recorded music accessible to anyone with an internet connection. From a bone flute to billions of songs in your pocket. What a journey. So here we are, in a world saturated with sound. But why do we listen to music? Why does it hold such a profound and enduring grip on the human spirit? Well, for starters, it's profoundly emotional. Music has an unparalleled ability to tap into our feelings, to amplify our joy, to soothe our sorrows, to ignite our anger, or to calm our anxieties. A perfectly timed chord change can send a shiver down your spine. A melody can bring tears to your eyes, or make you want to dance uncontrollably, often at inappropriate moments. It externalizes what we feel inside, making us feel less alone. It's also a powerful tool for social bonding. Think of national anthems, protest songs, mosh pits at concerts, or the shared experience of a dance floor. Music brings people together, fostering a sense of community and shared identity. You like that band? Me too. We should be best friends. It's a universal connector. Beyond the emotional and social, music offers cognitive benefits. Studies suggest that listening to music can improve memory, focus, and even language acquisition. Learning an instrument can boost problem-solving skills and creativity. While the Mozart effect, the idea that listening to classical music makes you smarter, has been largely debunked as an oversimplification, there's no doubt that engaging with music actively fires up a significant portion of our brains. It's a mental workout disguised as entertainment. And sometimes we just need it for motivation. That workout playlist that gets you through the last mile, the pump up anthem before the big presentation, the chill out tunes when you just need to unplug. Music is the ultimate personal assistant for our moods and tasks. It helps us escape, focus, or simply exist more fully in the moment. Ultimately, perhaps the most profound reason we listen to music is that it speaks to something in us that words cannot. It bypasses the analytical mind and goes straight for the soul. It's an abstract art form that communicates universal truths through patterns of sound. It gives form to the formless, expresses the inexpressible, and often feels like coming home. From the first rhythmic clang of bone on rock to the intricate digital symphonies of today, music has been a constant companion to humanity. It's our oldest art form, our most universal language, and perhaps the purest expression of what it means to be human. It's not just what it is, but how it makes us feel, and the countless ways it helps us navigate the bewildering, beautiful journey of life. So the next time you hear a melody, pause for a moment. Appreciate the millennia of human ingenuity, emotion, and connection that have gone into creating that sound. It's more than just noise, it's magic. And that, my friends, is a little glimpse into what music is. If you enjoyed diving into this topic, please hit that like button, subscribe to What Is for more explorations into the mysteries of the universe, and let us know in the comments below, what's your go-to piece of music, and what topic should we unravel next? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Welcome back to What Is, where we take the things you see every day and strip them down to their bare components to see what makes them tick. Or in today's case, what makes them ring, buzz, and occasionally annoy your neighbors at 3 in the morning. Today we're asking, what is a guitar? Now on the surface, that's a stupid question. You know what a guitar is. It's the wooden thing with the hourglass figure and the strings. It's the thing that Jimmy Page played on a double neck. The thing that Taylor Swift used to write breakup anthems. And the thing your cousin Tyler swore he was going to master over the summer break. before he discovered TikTok, of course. But if we look closer, if we really peer into the sound hole, the guitar is a mechanical marvel of physics, a masterclass in evolution, and arguably the most culturally transformative object of the last century. It's a chordophone. That is the fancy scientific term for any musical instrument that makes sound by way of a vibrating string stretched between 2 points. Technically, a piano is a chordophone too, but you can't exactly strap a Steinway onto your back and hike into the woods to play Wonderwall by a campfire. Well, you could, but the logistics are a nightmare. Structurally, the guitar is a simple beast. You have the body, a hollow wooden box that acts as an amplifier. You have the neck, which is the long wooden plank where the magic happens. And you have the frets, those tiny metal strips that tell your fingers exactly where to go so you don't sound like a dying cat. And finally you have the strings, usually 6 of them, though if you're into Russian folk or Swedish metal, all bets are off. The physics are elegant. You pluck a string, the string vibrates. Those vibrations travel through the bridge, the little piece of wood holding the strings to the body, and into the top of the guitar, known as the soundboard. The soundboard vibrates, pushing the air inside the body out of the sound hole. It is quite literally a box that turns finger twitches into art. But where did this box come from? It didn't just fall out of the sky when Chuck Berry was born. No, the guitar has a family tree more complicated than a royal European dynasty. To find the ancestor of the guitar, we have to go back, way back, before the electric amp, before the Spanish flamenco, before even the medieval lute. We have to go back 5,000 years to the ancient Near East. Archaeologists have found carvings in Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt of people holding long-necked stringed instruments. These were the tambours. They look a bit like a cereal bowl on a stick. It wasn't a guitar yet, but it had the DNA. The word guitar itself is a linguistic traveller. It likely comes from the ancient Greek word kithara. Now the kithara was more of a lyre. Think of a small harp that you hold against your chest. But as the instrument migrated through the Roman Empire and into the hands of the Moors in North Africa, it began to change. By the time the Moors crossed into the Iberian Peninsula, modern-day Spain, around the 8th century, they brought with them the oud. If you've ever seen an oud, it looks like a guitar that's been through a cartoonish accident. It has a deep, pear-shaped body and a neck that snaps back at a 90-degree angle at the top. Europeans looked at the oud and said, "That's cool, but what if we made it harder to play?" In Spain, the oud evolved into the vihuela. This is the moment the guitar really starts to look like itself. The vihuela had a flat back and an indented waist, that classic figure 8 shape. Why the waist? Well, it wasn't for aesthetics. Some historians argue it was to make the instrument easier to hold, while others suggest it was a carryover from bowed instruments like the violin, where the waist allows the bow to move without hitting the body. For a few hundred years, the guitar's ancestors lived in the shadow of the lute. The lute was the king of the Renaissance. It was an instrument of the aristocracy. The guitar, meanwhile, was the folk instrument. It was smaller, it had fewer strings, and it was played by the commoners. Imagine it's the year 1600. If you're a nobleman, you're listening to a complex 24-string lute composition. If you're at a tavern getting a pint of ale, someone is banging out a rhythm on a 4-course Baroque guitar. The guitar was the indie choice. It was portable, it was loud, and it was the instrument of the people. But then came the 19th century, and with it a man named Antonio de Torres Huedo. If you play the guitar today, you owe this man a Christmas card. Before Torres, guitars were small, narrow, and quiet. They were parlor instruments. Torres changed everything. In the 1850s, he increased the size of the body, thinned out the soundboard to make it more resonant, and perfected the fan bracing system inside the guitar. This allowed the instrument to project sound much further. He essentially invented the modern classical guitar. He gave it the proportions we see today. He turned it from a parlor toy into a concert hall-worthy powerhouse. But while Spain was perfecting the nylon string sound, something else was happening across the Atlantic. In America, the guitar was facing a problem. In the late 1800s, people were playing in large ensembles. Brass bands, mandolin orchestras, and early jazz groups. The Spanish-style guitar, with its gut strings, just wasn't loud enough. It was getting drowned out by the trombones. Enter Christian Friedrich Martin, a German immigrant. Martin started building guitars with steel strings instead of gut or nylon. Steel strings have a much higher tension, which means they are significantly louder, but that tension would snap a Spanish guitar like a twig. So Martin invented X-bracing, a sturdy internal wooden support system that could handle the pull of the steel. This was the birth of the American dreadnought. It was big, it was metallic, and it was loud. This was the sound of the frontier. But even steel strings weren't enough. By the 1930s, big bands were in full swing. If you were a guitar player in a jazz band, you were basically just a percussionist who happened to have strings. No one could hear your solos. The quest for volume led to the most radical shift in musical history, the electric guitar. It started with a frying pan. No, really. In 1931, George Beauchamp and Adolf Rickenbacker created the first commercially viable electric guitar, and it was nicknamed the frying pan because it was made of aluminium and had a long, skinny neck. It used an electromagnetic pickup to turn string vibrations into electrical signals that could be pumped through an amplifier. Suddenly the guitar wasn't the quietest instrument in the room, it was the loudest. In the 1940s and 50s, two titans emerged who would define the rest of our lives: Leo Fender and Les Paul. Leo Fender was a radio repairman who didn't even know how to play the guitar, but he was a genius of mass production. He created the Telecaster, the first mass-produced solid-body electric guitar. It was simple, it was rugged, and you could fix it with a screwdriver. It was the Model T of music. Then came Les Paul, a virtuoso guitarist and tinkerer, who wanted a guitar that could sustain a note forever. He teamed up with the Gibson Guitar Corporation to create the Les Paul model. Where Fender was sunny California and twang, Gibson was heavy mahogany and growl. These two designs, the Fender Stratocaster and the Gibson Les Paul, became the Excalibur and the Mjolnir of the 20th century. And that brings us to the most important part of the story, the role in culture. Why the guitar? Why not the accordion? Why didn't we have accordion heroes in the 1970s? Actually, let's be thankful for that. The guitar became the dominant cultural force because it is the ultimate democratic instrument. A piano is expensive and stays in the living room. A violin takes years of agonizing practice before you don't sound like a screeching owl. But a guitar? You can buy a cheap one at a pawn shop. You can learn 3 chords, G, C, and D, in just an afternoon. And with those 3 chords, you can play around 40% of all songs ever written. In the 1950s, the guitar became the symbol of teenage rebellion. When Elvis Presley swung a guitar over his shoulder, he wasn't just playing music. He was signaling a break from the big band era of his parents. The guitar was dangerous. It was suggestive. By the 1960s, it was the tool of the revolution. It was Bob Dylan at Newport going electric. It was Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock, coaxing sounds out of a Stratocaster that seemed to come from another dimension. Hendrix didn't just play the guitar. He dismantled the very idea of what a musical instrument could be. He used feedback, distortion, and whammy bars to turn a wooden plank into a psychedelic weapon. The guitar became the voice of the individual. In a world of massive corporations and sprawling governments, the image of a lone person with a guitar on their back became the universal shorthand for the truth teller. It's also surprisingly versatile. Think about it. The guitar is the backbone of heavy metal, where it's used to create wall-shaking riffs. It's the heart of flamenco, where it's a rhythmic, percussive force. It's the soul of blues, where it's used to mimic the human voice's cries and moans. It's the foundation of folk, country, jazz, and even modern pop. Even in the age of synthesizers and laptops, the guitar hasn't gone away. Every few years, someone writes an article titled, "Is the Guitar Dead?" And then a new kid from the suburbs uploads a video of themselves playing a technical masterpiece on a 7-string guitar. Or some indie band hits the charts with a catchy riff, and the cycle starts all over again. There's something tactile about the guitar that digital music can't replace. It's the feeling of the strings under your calloused fingertips. It's the way the wood vibrates against your ribs when you strike a low E chord. It's an intimate instrument. You embrace it to play it. The guitar is also the only instrument that has a dedicated air version. No one goes around playing air oboe or air cello in their bedroom, but everyone, and I mean everyone, has played air guitar. It's the universal language of this song rules. Fun fact, in the west coast Scottish town of Ayr, there is a music shop. Guess what it's called? Air guitar. So what is a guitar? It's a 5,000-year-old traveler. It's a box of air. It's a collection of magnets and wire. It's a tool for the poet and a toy for the rock star. It's a way for a shy kid to find their voice, and a way for a legend to speak to 100,000 people at once. It is quite possibly the most perfect machine humans have ever built for the sole purpose of feeling something. Whether it's the nylon strings of a Spanish master, or the steel string hum of a folk singer, or the distorted scream of a Marshall stack, the guitar remains our favorite way to bridge the gap between silence and soul. And hey, if you've got that old guitar sitting in the corner of your room gathering dust, the one you promised you'd learn to play 3 years ago, maybe today's the day you pick it up. Just maybe, warn the neighbors first if you're planning on being the next Hendrix. Thanks for watching this episode of What Is. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of 6 strings and wood, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel out. And if you want to know more about the what behind the why of the world around you, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. What should we cover next? The history of the light bulb? The physics of a skateboard? The mystery of why the G string on the guitar can never stay in tune? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep playing. See you in the next one. Imagine you're at a heavy metal concert. The lights go dim, the crowd surges forward, the drummer lifts his sticks high, and then, smash! The most guttural, earth-shaking sound you've ever heard erupts from the amplifiers. It's not singing, it's not screaming, it's something else entirely. It's the sound of humans pushing their vocal cords to the absolute limit of what is biologically possible. Welcome to death metal. If you've never heard of death metal, you might be thinking of something violent or disturbing, and honestly, you'd be partially right. But here's what most people don't know. Death metal is one of the most technically impressive, musically complex, and philosophically rich genres in all of heavy metal. It's a genre that celebrates precision, mathematical timing, and an almost academic dedication to sonic extremity. Today we're going to answer the question, what is death metal? We'll explore its origins in the late 1980s, dissect its defining musical characteristics, break down those infamous guttural vocals, and examine the genre's surprisingly intellectual lyrical themes, and meet some of the pioneers who helped create this uncompromising sound. By the end of this video, you'll have a whole new appreciation for the music that sounds like a garbage disposal eating cement mixer. Let's dive in. Defining death metal. So what exactly is death metal? Let's start with the basics. Death metal is a subgenre of heavy metal that emerged in the mid to late 1980s. It's characterized by its heavily distorted guitars, aggressive drumming, and super low-tuned instruments, and perhaps most distinctively, death growls, those deep, guttural voices that sound like someone singing from the depths of Freddy Krueger's nightmares. Death metal isn't just about being loud or heavy. There's actually a method to the madness. The genre places an enormous emphasis on technical proficiency. We're talking about musicians who often have classical training, jazz influences, and an obsessive attention to rhythm and timing. If standard rock and roll is a wild sprint through a meadow, death metal is a perfectly choreographed marathon through an obstacle course while on fire. The best death metal bands make extraordinary complex compositions feel somehow both chaotic and precisely engineered at the same time. Now let's address the elephant in the room, the vocals. How do musicians actually produce those sounds? There's no single technique. Some vocalists use what are called false chord vocalizations, or vocal fry, where they vibrate their false vocal cords. Those are the chords above your actual vocal cords, which allow them to create the impossible low rumbles. Others use a technique sometimes called pig squeals, which involves constricting the throat to produce higher-pitched metallic sounds that somehow still manage to sound inhuman. Something that surprises most people, many death metal vocalists can't actually sustain these sounds for very long. Recording sessions often involve taking multiple breaks, drinking lots of water, and sometimes literally gargling with ice to reduce inflammation. It's genuinely hard on the vocal cords, which is why many death metal singers transition to cleaner vocals as they age, or why some legends unfortunately had to quit touring due to vocal damage. The genre also has many subgenres worth knowing about. Melodic death metal incorporates more melodic guitar lines and sometimes clean vocals alongside the growls. Think of bands like In Flames or Dark Tranquillity from Sweden. Technical death metal pushes complexity even further with intricate time signatures, proggy arrangements, and almost mathematical precision. Bands like Obscura and Periphery represent this style. Brutal death metal focuses on the sheer heaviness and intensity, often with faster tempos and even more extreme sounds. Florida's Cannibal Corpse is perhaps the most famous example. Death doom slows things down, taking the aggression of death metal and combining it with the pessimistic atmosphere of doom metal. It's like funeral music for the end of the world itself. Each subgenre offers a different flavor, but they all share that core foundation: heavy instrumentation, technical musicianship, and those unforgettable vocals. Just before we continue our journey into death metal, if you're finding this exploration worthwhile, hit that subscribe button and join the What Is community. We explore all kinds of fascinating topics, and I think you'll like what comes next. Alright, now that we know what death metal is, let's explore where it came from. History and origins. To understand death metal, we need to get in our DeLoreans and travel back to the mid-1980s, a time when heavy metal was evolving rapidly and pushing boundaries in every direction. The roots of death metal can be traced directly to thrash metal, the faster, angrier cousin of classic heavy metal that gave us bands like Slayer, Megadeth, and Metallica. Thrash had already proven that metal could be aggressive, intense, and politically charged, but some musicians wanted to go even further. The earliest death metal bands began experimenting with slower, heavier songs featuring deeper vocals and more disturbing themes. These were inspired by horror movies, from the gory practical effects of the 80s slasher films to the cosmic horror of H.P. Lovecraft, and wanted to translate that visceral, unsettling energy into music. Two scenes emerged as the birthplace of death metal: Florida and Sweden. In Florida, a movement sometimes called Florida death metal, or gore grind, was brewing in cities like Tampa and Orlando. Bands like Death, Obituary, and Morbid Angel became pioneers. And here's where it gets historically significant. Death, led by guitarist and visionary Chuck Schuldiner, released Scream Bloody Gore in 1987, and many music historians consider this the first true death metal album. It had everything: extremely fast drums, heavily distorted guitars, bludgeoning riffs, and growls that sounded like they came from beyond the grave. The genre was born. Chuck Schuldiner wasn't just a musician, he was essentially the genre's founding father. He wrote, recorded, and produced much of Death's early material, and later evolved the band's sound across albums that progressively showcase more technical skill and musical ambition. If you want to understand death metal's DNA, you start with Chuck. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic in Sweden, a parallel but distinct scene was developing: Swedish death metal, that would later be known as Swedish melodic death metal or Gothenburg sound, which brought a slightly different approach. While Florida death metal tended towards pure brutality, the Swedish bands incorporated melodic guitar hooks, atmospheric arrangements, and occasionally cleaner singing. The city of Gothenburg became synonymous with this style, with bands like In Flames, Dark Tranquillity, and At the Gates leading the charge in the early to mid-1990s. These bands didn't just create music, they built an entire aesthetic. The distinctive Swedish corpse paint, white face paint with dark circles around the eyes, became instantly recognizable and influenced generations of metal musicians worldwide. By the early 1990s, death metal had developed its own infrastructure, specialized record labels like Nuclear Blast and Relapse Records, dedicated metal magazines like Metal Hammer and Kerrang, and a passionate underground fan base that traded cassette tapes and corresponded through actual handwritten letters. Yes, kids, this was before the internet, and somehow we survived. The genre never achieved mainstream commercial success in the traditional sense. That's just not what death metal is about. But it had developed a fiercely loyal following and influenced countless musicians across virtually every genre of heavy music. Modern metalcore, progressive metal, gent, and even some alternative rock bands have adopted techniques and philosophies directly from death metal. And here's something that might surprise you. Death metal's influences extend far beyond heavy music. Classical composers, film score composers, and experimental musicians have studied death metal techniques for their rhythmic complexity and emotional intensity. Some symphony orchestras have performed arrangements of death metal songs, not because they're secretly metalheads, but because the compositions themselves are genuinely interesting from a musical theory standpoint. That's the legacy of death metal. It took the aggression of heavy metal and transformed it into something genuinely artistic and intellectually demanding. Themes and ideology. Now let's talk about what death metal is actually about. If you only knew about death metal from media coverage or cautious parents warning you about devil music, you probably assume it's all about violence, Satan, and negativity. And while some bands definitely explore those themes, the reality is far more nuanced, and honestly way more interesting. Early death metal lyrics drew heavily on horror movie imagery: gore, zombies, mutilation, cosmic horror. Bands like Cannibal Corpse built entire careers around lyrics so disturbingly graphic that some stores actually refused to stock their albums. But here's the important context. This was largely an artistic statement about pushing boundaries and challenging social taboos. It was metal's version of shock art, an intentional provocation designed to make people uncomfortable and spark conversations about why certain things disturb us. As the genre matured, so did its lyrical content. Many death metal bands began exploring genuinely thought-provoking themes: philosophy and existentialism, questions about morality, the meaning of existence, and humanity's place in the universe. Some death metal lyricists drew heavily from existential philosophy, exploring through the lens of horror fiction. Science fiction. Concepts like artificial intelligence, space exploration, dystopian futures, and the potential, both hopeful and terrifying, of human technological advancement. Social commentary. Critics have pointed out that bands like Cattle Decapitation satirize human civilization's treatment of animals and the environment, delivering genuinely provocative messages wrapped in extreme musical packaging. Personal and psychological themes. Depression, inner turmoil, and the human condition. Surprisingly, death metal often provides an emotional outlet for listeners dealing with difficult feelings. The aggressive music becomes a cathartic release. Here's something that may reshape how you think about the genre. Many death metal fans describe the music as emotionally uplifting, not despite of its heaviness, but because of it. The intensity creates a space where overwhelming emotions can be processed safely. It's actually pretty similar to how some people use horror movies to confront fear in a controlled environment. There's also the philosophical thread running throughout death metal culture that's often overlooked. Many death metal musicians describe themselves as agnostic or atheist, and their dark themes aren't really about promoting evil. They're about questioning organized religion, exploring human morality without comforting illusions, and embracing the reality that life is temporary and often brutal. Far from being nihilistic, many death metal fans and artists are actually deeply thoughtful people who use extreme art to process complex emotions about existence. The aggressive exterior often hides a genuinely philosophical depth. Key artists and essential listening. Now let's get to the part you've probably been waiting for, the music. Here are essential death metal artists every newcomer should know. Death. As mentioned, Chuck Schuldina's band, essentially the genre's namesake, start with Symbolic 1995 for more accessible melodic death metal, or Spiritual Healing 1990 for classic Florida death metal. Cannibal Corpse, the most notorious band in death metal. Their early albums are notoriously graphic, but their musicianship is undeniable. Start with Tomb of the Mutilated 1992, or the slightly more restrained Bloodthirst 2002. Obituary, pioneers of Florida death metal with a slightly more straightforward, mosh-friendly approach. Self-titled and Cause of Death are essential listening. Chuck Schuldina's Control Reservoir, underrated project showing Schuldina's more experimental side with genuine progressive rock elements. In Flames, the definitive Swedish melodic death metal band. Their 1990s catalogue, especially the Jester Race 1996, is absolutely essential. At the Gates, another Swedish pioneer whose 1995 album Slaughter of the Soul profoundly influenced modern metalcore. Nile, for something truly unique. Egyptian-themed death metal with Middle Eastern scales and incredibly technical arrangements. Amongst the Catacombs of Nefren-Ka is a masterpiece. Opeth, a Swedish band that evolved from pure death metal into progressive excellence. Their earlier work, particularly Blackwater Park, blends death metal fury with acoustic passages and genuine beauty. Ludwig, newer wave technical death metal, pushing the genre's complexity even further with jazz-infused arrangements. For a quick sampling, I'd recommend checking out these landmarks. For melodic death metal mastery, Zero Tolerance by Be'lakor. For technical innovation, Pulling Out Nails by Cynic. Thrash metal-infused death metal, there's Mouth of Madness by Annihilator. Environmental themes and French precision comes from Life Unled by Gojira. And for a modern classic, The Last Silencer, October 21. What was the first death metal song that you heard that got you into the genre? Drop it in the comments below. For me, it was Skull Full of Maggots by Cannibal Corpse. Cultural impact and misconceptions. Before we wrap up, let's address some of the common misconceptions about death metal. Misconception 1. Death metal fans are angry or violent people. Actually, studies consistently show that metal fans, death metal included, are no more prone to violence than any other music fans. Many describe the music as therapeutic, a way to process difficult emotions in a healthy outlet. Misconception 2. Death metal promotes Satanism. While some bands explore dark themes, the vast majority aren't actually Satanists. Many are atheists exploring horror as art, or agnostics questioning religious orthodoxy. Misconception 3. It takes no talent. This one particularly annoys me. Death metal requires extraordinary technical skill. The intricate rhythms, precise timing, and sustained intensity demand years of practice. Plus, maintaining those vocals without damaging your throat is genuinely challenging. Misconception 4. Death metal fans are all teenage rebels. The demographics might surprise you. The average death metal fan is actually in their 30s or 40s, often professionals, academics, and thoughtful individuals who simply appreciate complex music. And there you have it. What death metal is, where it came from, and why it matters. Death metal represents one of heavy music's most technically demanding and artistically ambitious expressions. It transformed the aggression of early metal into something complex and thought-provoking, proving that extreme art can also be meaningful art. Whether you end up loving it or deciding it's not for you, I hope this video gave you a newfound appreciation for the musicians who've dedicated their lives to pushing their creative boundaries, even if those boundaries sound like a garbage disposal fighting a chainsaw. Remember to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more What Is. If you want to continue exploring music of every genre, check out our other musical What Is videos. There's a playlist linked above. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments below. Are you a death metal fan or a newcomer? What other music genres would you like me to cover next? Thanks for watching, stay curious, stay hungry, and see you next time. What is it exactly that makes a sound so bright, so crisp, so impossibly cheerful that it can turn a quiet room into a sunlit Italian piazza in under 3 seconds? It's not a guitar, it's not a violin, it's not a banjo, and it is definitely not a ukulele, though you'd be amazed how many people at parties will confidently call it that. This instrument can make you feel like you're sitting in a cafe in Naples in 1890. It can make you want to dance. It can make you cry, in a good way. It has 6 pairs of strings. It looks like a tiny guitar married a violin, and they had a baby with an identity crisis. Today on What Is, we're finding out what the mandolin actually is, where it came from, why it sounds the way it does, and how a small pear-shaped instrument somehow ended up in the hands of classical composers, bluegrass pickers, rock legends, and that one guy at every campfire who somehow knows 17 songs by heart. This is What Is a Mandolin? Instrument design. Let's start with the basics, because honestly, if you walked up to a mandolin and didn't know what it was, you'd have questions. And some of those questions would be, why is it so small? Why does it have double strings? And why does it look like someone took a guitar and put it in the dryer on high heat? A standard mandolin, specifically the most common type, the Neapolitan or roundback mandolin, has a body shaped something like a teardrop or a pear. It has a curved soundboard, a fretted neck, and usually 4 pairs of strings. That's 8 strings in total. They're arranged in courses, just like a 12-string guitar, but much tighter together. The strings are tuned in perfect fifths, G, D, A, E, the same intervals as a violin, just an octave lower. And here's where things get interesting, and a little counterintuitive. Because the strings are so short and so close together, the mandolin produces a bright piercing tone. But because the strings are double, 2 strings per course, wound very close together, when you pluck them, they vibrate in sync and create a shimmering chorus-like effect. It's almost like hearing 2 slightly detuned instruments playing at once. That gives the mandolin its signature sparkle. Now there are a few different types of mandolin, and they each sound a little different. The 2 most common are the A style and the F style. The A style has that classic teardrop or oval shape, elegant, simple, like a beautiful vase someone added strings to. It tends to produce a warmer, rounder tone. It's the one you'll most often see in folk and traditional music. The F style, named for its Florentine shape, which is essentially a teardrop with extra decorative cutaways and a more pointed body, has a more complex arch to its soundboard. It projects more, it cuts through a mix better, and it tends to have a brighter, more resonant sound. It also looks like a small, extremely fancy boat. There's also the mandola, which is basically a mandolin tuned down, like a viola to a violin, and the mandocello, and even the mandobass, which is exactly what it sounds like. They're all part of the mandolin family. But when people say mandolin, they're almost always referring to the 4-course, octave guitar-sized instrument we've been talking about. One more quick note before we move on. Most mandolins today are acoustic, meaning they make sound through the vibration of their soundboard. But there are also electric mandolins, and they're exactly what you'd expect. They look like small guitars, they plug into amps, and they do that whole shimmering sparkle thing, but louder. Think of it as the mandolin going to a rock concert. So that's the instrument. Now, where did it come from? Origins and development. The mandolin's story begins, as so many stories do, in Italy. Specifically, in and around Naples, in the late 1700s. That's when the mandolino, a small lute-like instrument with 4 courses of strings, started to take the shape we recognize today. But here's something that might surprise you. The mandolin isn't really from Italy. It has deep roots in even older instruments that came before it. The mandor, a small lute popular in France and Italy during the 16th and 17th centuries, is widely considered one of the mandolin's ancestors. There was also the mandolin da braccio, arm mandolin, which, you guessed it, was held like a violin. That one showed up in the 17th century and helped bridge the gap between lute traditions and the emerging stringed instrument design we know now. What the Neapolitan makers did, and this is the key part, was refine and standardize the design. By the mid-1800s, luthiers in Naples were building the round-back mandolin with 4 courses of strings, that characteristic teardrop body, and a tuned bridge. It became the template. That design crossed the Atlantic and became the American mandolin tradition, largely thanks to one man, Orville Gibson. Orville Gibson was a luthier in Kalamazoo, Michigan in the late 1800s. He started building instruments with arched tops and backs, something previously reserved for violins, and the result was louder, more resonant, and a lot more responsive than the European imports. Gibson founded the Gibson Mandolin Guitar Manufacturing Company in 1902, and within a few years, they'd essentially cornered the American mandolin market. Gibson's instruments, especially the F model, became the gold standard, and their influence is still felt today. If you pick up an F-style mandolin, you're holding a design that is well over a century old, with roots going back even further. That's remarkable when you think about it. The mandolin essentially reached its classic form before the telephone was even widely used. Now here's where it gets really interesting. In the early 1900s, the mandolin was enormously popular in the United States. Mandolin orchestras were a thing. Full ensembles with mandolins, mandolas, mandocellos, and guitars, playing arrangements of classical pieces, popular songs, and original compositions. There were dozens of recorded mandolin orchestras. It was a genuine cultural phenomenon. Then, around the 1920s and 30s, the mandolin's popularity in mainstream American music began to decline. Jazz got bigger, the guitar rose to dominance, and the mandolin, for a while, became something of a novelty. But it found new homes. And that's where things get exciting. If you are enjoying this exploration of the mandolin, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more musical explorations and more. Back to the mandolin, and next let's look at prominent uses in music and styles. The mandolin is one of those rare instruments that doesn't just belong to one genre, it belongs to many. And honestly, that's part of what makes it so special. Let's start with classical music. The mandolin has been a legitimate classical instrument since the late 18th century. Vivaldi wrote for it. Beethoven was sent a mandolin and wrote a sonata for it, the Mandolin Sonata in C minor, WOO 43, because apparently a wealthy patron asked him to, and he complained in a letter that the mandolin was, quote, not worth a rap. But he wrote the piece anyway, and it's actually lovely. In the 20th century, composers like Igor Stravinsky, John Cage, and Leo Brouwer all wrote for the mandolin, expanding its technical range and bringing it into the avant-garde. The instrument that was once dismissed as a casual social instrument turned out to have serious musical depth. Now, and this is where things get really fun, let's talk about bluegrass. If you've ever heard bluegrass music, you've almost certainly heard a mandolin. It's absolutely fundamental to the genre, The fast-driving tremolo, that rapid-fire picking where you barely lift your fingers from the strings, is one of the most recognizable sounds in all of American music. Bill Monroe, who is literally called the father of bluegrass, played mandolin. So did David Grisman, Sam Bush, Mike Compton, and dozens of others. The mandolin in bluegrass isn't just an accompaniment instrument, it's a lead voice. It dances, it drives, it syncopates, it swings. And that's the thing about the mandolin. It swings. It has a natural bouncy rhythm that makes you want to tap your foot, clap your hands, and, if you're anything like me, attempt to play along despite having no musical ability whatsoever. It's deeply infectious. Moving into folk and Americana, the mandolin is everywhere. It's been a fixture of American folk music since the early 1900s, appearing in string bands, old-time groups, and singer-songwriter setups. Artists like John Hartford, Greg Allman, and more recently Rhiannon Giddens have used the mandolin to add texture, warmth, and a touch of old-world charm to modern music. And then there's rock and pop. The mandolin has shown up in rock music more often than you might think. The Beatles used it. George Harrison played a mandolin on The Fool, and John Lennon played one on Glass Onion. Led Zeppelin featured it on The Battle of Evermore, played by Sandy Denny. Radiohead used it. Bon Iver, The Flaming Lips, even Kurt Cobain, yes, that Kurt Cobain, played a mandolin on the Nirvana track, Lake of Fire. It pops up in pop music too. Taylor Swift has used mandolin. The Strokes. It's that instrument that can feel at home in an arena rock anthem and a quiet, intimate folk ballad. It adapts, it blends, it doesn't demand attention, but it absolutely commands it when it shows up. And that's not even the full picture. There's Celtic and Irish folk music, where the mandolin, sometimes called the Irish mandolin, brings a bright, danceable energy to jigs and reels. There's Brazilian music, where it appears in choro and MPB. There's Mediterranean and Middle Eastern music, and even Japanese folk traditions that have incorporated the instrument. The mandolin is, frankly, a musical chameleon. It doesn't argue with other styles, it complements them. Famous players. There have been extraordinary mandolin players in just about every era and genre. Let's talk about a few of the ones who really shaped the instrument's legacy. First, Bill Monroe, the father of bluegrass. His fast, precise, driving playing defined what the mandolin could do in a bluegrass context. He played a Gibson F5, and his style, full of triplet-based runs, cross-picking, and relentless rhythm, became the blueprint. Every bluegrass mandolin player today is, in some way, playing in Bill Monroe's language. Next, David Grisman, known to his fans as Dog. Grisman essentially created a whole genre. Dog music, a blend of bluegrass, jazz, classical, and swing. His playing is incredibly clean, incredibly precise, and incredibly musical. He recorded extensively as a solo artist, and with his band, the Dog Band, and his influence on modern stringed instrument playing, not just mandolin, is enormous. And then there's Sam Bush, often called the Mandolin Monkey. If you've never seen Sam Bush play live, do yourself a favor and look him up. His energy is absolutely infectious. He's a bluegrass player, but he brings elements of rock, blues, and jazz into his playing. He's worked with everyone from Emmylou Harris to John Paul Jones to Fish. He's one of those musicians who makes you rethink what's possible on an instrument. In the classical world, there's Ugo Orlandi, one of the preeminent classical mandolin players of the 20th century, known for his beautiful tone and expressive playing, and Mauro Squassera and Friedrich T.H. Wolf, all part of a lineage of classical mandolinists who kept the instrument alive in the concert hall when it had largely faded from popular attention. In more modern times, players like Chris Thiele, who, between his work with Nickel Creek, Punch Brothers, and Brad Mehldau, has basically reimagined what a mandolin can do in contemporary music, have taken the instrument into entirely new territory. Thiele plays jazz, bluegrass, and experimental music with equal fluency. He's arguably the most technically advanced mandolin player alive, and he's constantly pushing the instrument forward. And let's not forget the non-musicians, the people who hear a mandolin for the first time and suddenly want to learn. That impulse, that moment where a sound hits you and makes you think, I need to know how to do that. That's part of what makes this instrument so special. Influence and future. So, what does the future hold for the mandolin? Is it a relic, a niche instrument, or is it something more? Here's what I think. The mandolin has survived wars, musical trends, instrument fads, and the rise and fall of entire genres. It's been written off more than once, and every time it finds its way back into the hands of musicians who see something in it that no other instrument can offer. The mandolin occupies a unique sonic space. It's brighter than a guitar. It's warmer than a violin. It's more percussive than either. It cuts through a mix without overwhelming it. And, perhaps most importantly, it makes people feel something. That bright, shimmering, impossibly cheerful sound has a way of cutting through gloom. In recent years, the mandolin has been experiencing something of a renaissance. Thanks to artists like Chris Thile, Rhiannon Giddens, and Sierra Hull, younger audiences are discovering it. It's showing up in indie folk, Americana, and even some electronic and experimental contexts. Luthiers are building better mandolins than ever, combining traditional craftsmanship with modern acoustics. There's also a growing community of players online, tutorials, covers, jam sessions, that is keeping the instrument accessible. You don't need a fancy concert hall. You don't need 100 years of training. You need 8 strings, a little patience, and a willingness to sound a little messy at first. And that's okay. Every mandolin player alive today started somewhere. The mandolin isn't just an instrument, it's a link between centuries and continents, between Neapolitan cafe culture and Kentucky bluegrass fields, between classical concert halls and campfire circles, between the past and whatever wild, unpredictable musical future we're heading toward. If you enjoyed this deep dive, and you're curious about other instruments, musical traditions, and the stories behind the sounds you love, make sure you hit subscribe and hit that bell icon. We cover all kinds of instruments, musical concepts, and the stories behind them. There's a lot more to explore, and I think you'll like what we have coming up. Now, let's get to that bonus. Before you go, here's a bonus fact that I think you'll really like. The mandolin is a member of the lute family, which means, over an enormous series of evolutionary steps, it's a distant relative of the oud, the ancient Middle Eastern instrument that gave rise to the lute, which gave rise to the guitar, which gave rise to basically every stringed instrument you can think of. So when you play a mandolin, you're holding an instrument whose family tree stretches back thousands of years, across continents and cultures, to a sound that humans have been chasing since the beginning of music itself. Not bad for something that looks like a shrunken guitar. Thanks for watching. See you next time. It's 2 a.m. You're in a smoky bar in rural Kentucky. A banjo just went absolutely insane, playing faster than seems physically possible. The mandolin is stabbing through the mix like a caffeinated woodpecker. And somehow, impossibly, 4 or 5 guys are singing in 3-part harmony, while their fingers blur across their instruments. You're not watching a music video. You're not at a concert. You're watching a bluegrass jam session. And now you're wondering, what is bluegrass? Well, grab your banjo, tune your mandolin, and let's find out together. Because by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what bluegrass is, where it came from, why it sounds the way it does, and, most importantly, why it has one of the most devoted fan bases in all of music. This is What is Bluegrass? And we're about to go on a wild ride through the mountains of Appalachia, through decades of evolution, and through some of the most technically brilliant musicians you're probably not listening to right now. The definition. So let's start with the obvious question. What is bluegrass? And here's where it gets a little complicated, because bluegrass is simultaneously a genre of music, a style of playing, and, according to some very passionate people, a way of life. But let's try to nail it down. Bluegrass is a subgenre of country music that originated in the Appalachian regions of the United States, primarily Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, and Tennessee, during the late 1940s and early 1950s. It's characterized by fast tempos, tight vocal harmonies, and acoustic instruments playing off each other in a way that creates this incredibly complex, layered sound. Now here's the important part. Bluegrass isn't just old-time country music. That's a common misconception, and if you say that around bluegrass fans, they will correct you. Firmly, sometimes loudly. Bluegrass has very specific rules, some written, some unwritten, and those rules are what make it distinctly bluegrass, and not just, say, folk or old-time. The origins, Bill Monroe. To understand bluegrass, you have to understand one man, Bill Monroe. Bill Monroe, often called the father of bluegrass, was born in 1911 in Rosine, Kentucky. And if you've never heard of Rosine, Kentucky, don't worry. Neither had most people. It's a tiny town in the western part of the state. Population, not a lot. But Bill Monroe changed that. Monroe grew up playing fiddle and singing in his family's string band. He moved to Chicago in the 1930s, started performing as a solo artist, and eventually formed what would become his legendary band, the Bluegrass Boys. Now here's where the name comes from. Bill Monroe's band was called the Bluegrass Boys, a reference to his home state of Kentucky, which is famously called the Bluegrass State. That grass, by the way, is a specific type of grass called Kentucky bluegrass, which grows incredibly well in Kentucky's climate and soil. So when people ask, why is it called bluegrass? That's why. It's named after Bill Monroe's band, which was named after Kentucky's signature grass. Geography. Simple, right? Named after grass. In a state named after grass. Named after a type of grass that grows in that state. Kentucky, everyone. The sound. Instruments. Now let's talk about what bluegrass sounds like. And to do that, we need to talk about instruments. The standard bluegrass band, often called a bluegrass combo, typically has 5 core instruments. The banjo. The banjo is arguably the most recognizable bluegrass instrument. It's that stringed instrument with a circular body, usually with 5 strings, that creates that distinctive buzzing, driving sound. In bluegrass, the banjo player typically plays a style called Scruggs style, named after the legendary player Earl Scruggs. This style involves using 3 fingers to create incredibly fast rhythmic patterns. We'll talk more about Earl Scruggs later, because he's kind of a big deal. The mandolin. The mandolin is a small lute-like instrument with 8 strings, paired in 4 courses. In bluegrass, the mandolin provides that driving, chopping rhythm that helps keep time. Players often use a technique called cross-picking, where they play melodies in a way that sounds like multiple instruments. It's technically demanding and sounds beautiful. The fiddle. The fiddle, which is just a violin used to play folk music, is the melodic heart of the bluegrass band. The fiddle player carries the main melody, while also providing fills and embellishments. Fiddle players in bluegrass often have incredible technical skill, playing double stops, slides, and ornaments that would make a classical violinist weep. The guitar. In bluegrass, the guitar serves as both rhythm and lead. Most bluegrass guitar players use a style called flat picking, where they use a single plectrum to play melodic lines and rhythmic chords. This is different from fingerstyle guitar playing, you know, like your uncle, who won't shut up about his Taylor Swift cover. The bass. The bass provides the low-end foundation. In traditional bluegrass, this is usually an upright bass, also called a string bass or double bass, though some modern bands use an electric bass. The bass player's job is simple: keep the rhythm and provide a solid foundation. Now here's where it gets interesting. In bluegrass, there's also something called breakdown playing, where each instrument takes turns playing the melody solo, while the others provide backup. This creates this incredible conversation between instruments, each one showing off, then stepping back, then showing off again. It's competitive, it's collaborative, and it sounds absolutely incredible. The characteristics. So what makes bluegrass sound like bluegrass? Let's break down the key characteristics. Tempo. Bluegrass is almost always up-tempo. We're talking fast, really fast. Some bluegrass songs push 200 beats per minute or more. That's faster than a lot of punk rock. The energy is relentless. Vocal harmonies. Bluegrass is famous for its tight 3-part and 4-part vocal harmonies. These aren't just chords, they're specific intervals, often featuring a high lead or tenor singing above the melody. The harmonies in bluegrass can be absolutely haunting. We'll talk more about this when we discuss the artists. Improvisation. While bluegrass has established patterns and structures, there's also a strong tradition of improvisation. Each instrument takes breaks, solo sections where they play the melody or improvise around it. The best bluegrass musicians can take a simple melody and turn it into something completely new in real time. The high, lonesome sound. This is a term you'll hear a lot in bluegrass. It refers to that emotional, haunting quality, often in the harmonies, that creates a sense of longing and melancholy. Even when the music is fast and joyful, there's often an undercurrent of sadness. This comes from the Appalachian folk tradition, which dealt with hard lives and harder losses. Acoustic instruments. This is crucial. Bluegrass is, with very few exceptions, played entirely on acoustic instruments. No electric guitars, no synthesizers, no drum kits. It's all acoustic all the time. This isn't snobbery, it's tradition. The sound of acoustic instruments interacting with each other is fundamental to what bluegrass is. If you're just joining us, or if you've made it this far, you're doing great. We're about halfway through understanding what bluegrass is, and there's so much more to cover. But before we keep going, I want to remind you that if you learn something new, or if you know someone who needs to understand bluegrass, this is the perfect time to share this video. Hit that share button. Send it to your friend who's convinced country music ended in 2010. Show your mom what you've been learning. Bluegrass deserves to be understood. Key artists, the pioneers. Now let's talk about the artists, the pioneers who shaped bluegrass into what it is today. Bill Monroe. We already talked about him. He's the father. His songs, Blue Moon of Kentucky, Orange Blossom Special, Rocky Top, are standards that every bluegrass player learns. His influence is impossible to overstate. Every bluegrass musician is, in some way, a descendant of Bill Monroe. Flatt and Scruggs. Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs formed one of the most influential bluegrass bands in history. Lester Flatt was a guitarist and vocalist with a rich, distinctive voice. Earl Scruggs was the banjo player who revolutionized the instrument with his 3-finger picking style. Their collaboration defined what bluegrass would sound like for decades. Their rendition of The Ballad of Jed Clampett, yes, that song from the Beverly Hillbillies, became a massive hit and introduced bluegrass to mainstream audiences. It was one of the first bluegrass songs to chart on the pop charts. The Stanley Brothers. Ralph Stanley and Carter Stanley were brothers who formed the Stanley Brothers and the Clinch Mountain Boys. Carter had a high, haunting voice. Ralph had a slightly gruffer sound. Their harmonies were, and remain, some of the most revered in bluegrass. After Carter died in 1966, Ralph continued performing for another 40 years. His performance at the first ever Bluegrass Festival in 1965 helped legitimize bluegrass as a genre worthy of academic study and festival attention. The Foggy Mountain Boys. This was Flatt and Scruggs' band. Their sound was tight, driving, and influential. They helped define the bluegrass lineup that most bands still use today. The reception and evolution. Bluegrass didn't just stay in the mountains. It spread through radio, through records, and through festivals. The Bluegrass Festival. In 1965, promoter Ralph Stanley and others organized the first annual Friends of the Farm Festival in Fincastle, Virginia. This is widely considered the first bluegrass music festival. It later moved to Bean Blossom, Indiana, and became the Bean Blossom Bluegrass Festival. Today there are bluegrass festivals all over the country. The Telluride Bluegrass Festival in Colorado, the International Bluegrass Music Awards in Nashville, Merlefest in North Carolina. These festivals draw thousands of fans and feature both legendary artists and emerging talent. The Folk Revival. Bluegrass got a major boost during the 1960s folk revival, when young college-educated whites discovered their parents' music and found it more authentic than the pop music of the era. Artists like Pete Seeger and Joan Baez helped introduce bluegrass to wider audiences. The Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. In the 1970s, the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band recorded Will the Circle Be Unbroken, a 3 LP set featuring collaborations with bluegrass legends like Roy Acuff, Flat and Scruggs, and Doc Watson. This album is often credited with helping revive bluegrass interest in the 1970s and introducing it to a new generation. Modern bluegrass. Today, bluegrass continues to evolve. Artists like Alison Krauss, Ricky Skaggs, The Seldom Scene, and others brought bluegrass into the mainstream in the 1980s and 1990s. More recently, bands like Mumford & Sons, the Avett Brothers, and Old Crow Medicine Show have incorporated bluegrass elements into their sound, sometimes creating what critics call newgrass or alternative bluegrass. Now here's where bluegrass fans get a little passionate. Some traditionalists argue that modern bluegrass bands are diluting the genre, that adding electric instruments or rock elements or pop songwriting is betraying bluegrass's roots. Others argue that evolution is natural and healthy, that bluegrass was never meant to be a museum piece. The truth is, bluegrass has always been evolving. Bill Monroe himself changed his sound over the decades. The definition of what makes something bluegrass has always been fluid. What remains constant is the core elements: acoustic instruments, tight harmonies, fast tempos, and that emotional depth. Whether that's traditional or progressive is, ultimately, a matter of taste. Bluegrass around the world. Bluegrass isn't just an American phenomenon anymore. It's spread around the world. Ireland and Scotland. Bluegrass has strong connections to Celtic music. After all, many Appalachian settlers came from Ireland and Scotland. Irish musicians have embraced bluegrass, and some have created their own fusion of Celtic and bluegrass traditions. Japan. Believe it or not, Japan has a thriving bluegrass scene. There are bluegrass festivals, bands, and even a bluegrass music school. Japanese musicians have become incredibly skilled at bluegrass, and some have gained followings in the United States. Europe. Bluegrass festivals have popped up all over Europe, in the UK, Germany, France, and Scandinavia. European musicians have put their own spin on bluegrass, creating interesting cross-cultural variations. Australia and New Zealand. Both countries have active bluegrass communities, with festivals and bands performing regularly. This is one of the beautiful things about bluegrass. It's adaptable. The core elements, the instrumentation, the harmonies, the technique, can be applied to many different musical contexts. Why bluegrass matters. So why does bluegrass matter? Why should you care about this genre of music that started in the hills of Kentucky in the 1940s? Here's why. Technical mastery. Bluegrass requires incredible technical skill. The tempos are fast, the harmonies are complex, the improvisational demands are high. The best bluegrass musicians are among the most technically proficient musicians in any genre. If you don't believe me, watch a banjo player doing a speed breakdown and try not to feel inadequate about your own musical abilities. Community. Bluegrass has one of the most dedicated fan communities in music. Bluegrass festivals aren't just concerts, they're gatherings. People come back year after year, forming friendships and communities that span decades. There's something about bluegrass that creates a connection. History. Bluegrass is a direct link to American musical history. It grew out of the Appalachian folk tradition, a tradition of songs, stories, and sounds that stretches back centuries. When you listen to bluegrass, you're hearing echoes of immigrants, pioneers, miners, farmers, and workers who lived hard lives and sang about them. Emotional depth. Here's the thing about bluegrass that surprises people who haven't listened closely. It's emotionally complex. Yes, there's joy. Yes, there's energy. But there's also profound sadness. There's longing. There's loss. Bluegrass songs deal with death, love, hardship, faith, and hope. The best bluegrass songs can make you feel something deeply. Living tradition. Bluegrass isn't just a historical artifact, it's a living tradition. New artists are constantly emerging, bringing new ideas while honoring the roots. The genre continues to evolve while maintaining its identity. That's rare in music. Getting started. If this video has made you curious about bluegrass, here's how to get started. Listen to the classics. Start with Bill Monroe, Flat and Scruggs, the Stanley Brothers, and Doc Watson. These are the foundations. Explore the festivals. If there's a bluegrass festival near you, go. The atmosphere is unlike almost any other genre. It's welcoming, family-friendly, and full of people who are passionate about the music. Watch performances. YouTube is your friend. There are countless bluegrass performances available. Watch live recordings from festivals. Watch competitions. Watch the masters. Learn an instrument. If you've ever wanted to learn the banjo, the mandolin, or the fiddle, bluegrass is a fantastic tradition to dive into. There are countless tutorials, books, and teachers available. Go to a jam. Bluegrass jams are happening in communities all over. These are informal gatherings where musicians of all skill levels play together. Don't be intimidated. If you're learning, people will help you. Bluegrass players are generally welcoming and happy to share the tradition. So, what is bluegrass? Bluegrass is a genre of music born in the mountains of Appalachia, defined by its fast tempos, tight harmonies, and acoustic instruments. It's a tradition that stretches back to Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys in the 1940s, and a living tradition that continues to evolve today. Its technical mastery and emotional depth, its community and connection, its joy and sadness, its centuries of history wrapped in a sound that can make you tap your foot, cry in your beer, or wonder how human fingers can move that fast. Bluegrass is a uniquely American art form, one that has spread around the world while maintaining its roots. It's a genre that demands skill, rewards attention, and creates community. And now, hopefully, you understand it a little better. If you enjoyed this deep dive into bluegrass, make sure you hit that subscribe button and leave a comment. What did you learn? What's your favorite bluegrass song? Who should we cover next? Because this is What Is, and we're just getting started. Thanks for watching. Now go find some bluegrass to listen to. I'll see you in the next one. Grab your coffee, your sense of humor, and, yes, a Hawaiian shirt, because we're about to answer the age-old question that has kept humanity awake at night. What is a ukulele? Picture this. You're lounging on a sun-drenched beach in Honolulu. The waves are whispering, the breeze is doing its best impression of a gentle fan, and a melodic four-string giggle floats through the air. That little bundle of joy. That's the ukulele. Part instrument, part sunshine, and a whole lot of, why didn't I learn this sooner? Now before you think, is it just a tiny guitar? Stop. The ukulele is far more than a guitar's cute younger sibling. It's an instrument that can fit in a tote bag, makes everyone smile, and frankly, makes the guitar a little jealous. So let's dive in, explore its design, its wild origin story, its most iconic tunes, the legends who wield it, and even peek into its future. And because this is a What Is video, we'll sprinkle in a few laughs along the way. Design, what it is. Let's start with the basics. What does a ukulele actually look like? At first glance, you see a small guitar-shaped body with 4 strings, but there's a lot more going on under that glossy coat. Body shapes. The most common are the soprano, concert, tenor, and baritone. Think of them as the baby, tween, teen, and adult versions. The soprano is the classic, about 21 inches long, perfect for that bright chipper sound. The concert adds a bit more room for your fingers, while the tenor gives you a deeper voice, ideal if you want to serenade a crowd without a microphone. The baritone is the biggest of the bunch and actually tuned like the lower four strings of a guitar. Materials. Most ukuleles are crafted from koa, the iconic Hawaiian wood, mahogany, spruce, or even acoustic-grade plastic for those quirky glamply models. The wood choice influences tone. Koa gives a warm, sweet resonance. Spruce adds brightness. And plastic? Well, plastic gives you that I'm on a budget and still want to sound cute vibe. Strings. They're typically nylon or nylon-wrapped nylon, softer on the fingertips than steel strings. That's why you won't see a ukulele player with calloused fingertips the size of a small mountain range. Tuning. The standard tuning for a soprano, concert, and tenor is G-C-E-A, often remembered as My Dog Has Fleas. The baritone flips it to D-G-B-E, which is basically a guitar's top four strings, but without the drama. Hardware. A ukulele's headstock looks like a tiny, elegant crown, and the frets are fewer than a guitar's, usually 12 to 15. This keeps the instrument simple, making it friendly for beginners and for anyone who doesn't want to memorize a novel of chord shapes. Now, why does any of this matter? Because the design is what gives the ukulele its signature sound. Bright, plucky, and surprisingly rich. Think of it as the audio equivalent of a popsicle on a hot day. Simple, refreshing, and instantly uplifting. Origins and development. Now, let's time travel to the late 19th century, when the ukulele began its accidental odyssey. The instrument we know today traces its roots to the Portuguese machete, also called the braguinha, a small four-stringed instrument that was popular in Madeira and the Azores. In 1879, a group of Portuguese immigrants, most notably João Fernandes, brought these little guitars to Hawaii. The story goes that Hawaiian musicians, eager for new sounds, adapted the machete, stringing it with the local kai, a type of plant fiber, and giving it the name ukulele, which literally means jumping flea. Why flea? Legend says the instrument's quick, bouncy sound reminded listeners of a flea hopping around. From that moment on, the ukulele became the heartbeat of Hawaiian music. It was embraced by royalty. King Kalakaua was famously a fan, featured in hula performances, and quickly spread to the US mainland. By the early 1900s, the ukulele had landed in American vaudeville and jazz clubs, where performers like Roy Smeck earned the nickname the King of the Guitar by dazzling audiences with his virtuosic ukulele playing. During the 1920s and 30s, the instrument saw a boom in manufacturing. Companies like Martin, Gibson, and Carla began producing models that are still collectible today. The iconic Martin Style Zero ukulele, for instance, is a vintage gem that can fetch a pretty penny at auction. The mid-20th century brought a dip in popularity as the guitar stole the spotlight with its rock and roll swagger. But the ukulele never truly went away. It simply retreated to the beaches, the backyard jam sessions, and the occasional cameo in cartoons. Then, in the early 2000s, a resurgence began. Thanks to artists like Israel Kamakawiwo Ole and the rise of YouTube tutorials, the ukulele became the go-to instrument for aspiring musicians who wanted something compact, affordable, and instantly gratifying. Today you'll find ukulele clubs in schools, senior centers, and even at tech conferences. Yes, there's a Tech Uke meetup in San Francisco. If you're loving this deep dive, hit the like button, smash that subscribe icon, and ring the notification bell, because we've got plenty more What Is episodes waiting for you. Next we will look at famous musical pieces. What would an instrument be without its soundtrack? The ukulele has a repertoire that's as diverse as a tropical fruit salad. Somewhere Over the Rainbow / What a Wonderful World. Israel Kamakawiwo Ole, 1993. The most recognizable ukulele anthem. This medley combines a rainbow-colored melody with a heartwarming message. Israel's soulful, slightly off-key ukulele strumming became the audio equivalent of a warm hug. I'm Yours, Jason Mraz, 2008. a pop-folk smash that made the ukulele a mainstream star once again. The breezy percussive ukulele riff is now a campfire staple, played by everyone from seasoned buskers to enthusiastic beginners. Riptide, Vance Joy, 2013. This track showcases the ukulele's ability to drive a catchy chorus. The driving rhythm and infectious melody have made it a go-to song for cover bands and wedding receptions alike. Ukulele Lady, KKY, 1925. One of the earliest hits that put the ukulele on the map in American pop culture. Its lilting melody and gentle strum still evoke images of 1920s speakeasies. Mele Kalikimaka, Bing Crosby and Andy Williams, 1949. The ultimate Christmas in Hawaii tune, complete with breezy uke chords that instantly transport you to a tropical holiday. Three Little Birds, Bob Marley, covered by countless ukulele players. While originally a reggae classic, its simple chord structure makes it a perfect ukulele jam. Mambo No. 5, Lou Bega, covered by ukulele virtuosos. A playful example of how the ukulele can tackle even the most chaotic pop songs. Classical and world pieces. Composers have also written original works for the ukulele, from Arthur Rimsky-Nikolaev's Ukulele Suite to contemporary pieces that blend Hawaiian slack key guitar with jazz improvisation. The beauty of these songs is that they often require only a handful of chords, making the ukulele the instrument of instant gratification for anyone with a few minutes and a desire to make music. Famous players. Now let's celebrate the artists who turned a modest four-string into a cultural phenomenon. Israel Kamakawiwo Ole, 1959 to 1997. The Hawaiian singer-songwriter whose Somewhere Over the Rainbow / What a Wonderful World became a global sensation. His distinct laid-back vocal style paired with a trusty Ovation ukulele, creating a sound that's as unmistakable as a sunrise over Diamond Head. Jake Shimabukuro. If anyone proved the ukulele can shred, it's Jake. His YouTube videos, particularly Ukulele Weeps and Dragon, have millions of views, showcasing lightning-fast fingerings that would make a guitarist blush. He's performed at TED, the Grammy Awards, and even had a documentary, Jake Shimabukuro, Life on Four Strings. Bill Tapia, 1918 to 2011. The Dean of Slack Key Ukulele was a virtuoso who played well into his 90s. Bill's contributions helped preserve the traditional Hawaiian slack key style, and his career spanned nearly a century of music. Eddie Kama, a legendary Hawaiian musician who, alongside his brother Leon, helped popularize the ukulele in the early 20th century, influencing countless island musicians. George Harrison. The Beatles' quiet genius was an avid ukulele enthusiast. He often played his Martin ukulele in the studio, and his love for the instrument is evident in tracks like All Those Years Ago. Paul McCartney. Not to be outdone, Paul has been spotted strumming a ukulele on stage and even released a version of And I Love Her on a ukulele. Taylor Swift. In the age of social media, Taylor has shared numerous ukulele covers of her own songs, inspiring a new generation of fans to pick up the tiny four-string. Grace VanderWaal. The young phenom won America's Got Talent with her original ukulele-driven songs, proving the instrument isn't just for nostalgia, it's a launchpad for new talent. These players illustrate the ukulele's versatility. From heartfelt Hawaiian ballads to mind-blowing virtuosity, the instrument can hold its own in any genre. Future. Where is the ukulele headed? If you think the ukulele has already hit its peak, think again. The little instrument is getting a tech-infused makeover that would make a Hawaiian volcano jealous. Electric and hybrid models. Companies like Reza and Stag are offering electric ukuleles that can be plugged into amps, giving the instrument a rock edge never heard before. Hybrid acoustic electric models are also gaining popularity, allowing players to perform on stage without worrying about feedback. Smart ukuleles. Imagine a ukulele with built-in sensors that sync with an app on your phone. These smart ukuleles can give real-time feedback on tuning, finger placement, and even suggest chord progressions based on the song you're playing. Some prototypes already exist, and startups are racing to bring them to market. Sustainable materials. As environmental awareness grows, luthiers are experimenting with eco-friendly materials. Bamboo, recycled plastics, and even green composite woods, while still delivering that classic ukulele tone. Global fusion. Musicians from Africa, Asia, and Europe are blending the ukulele with traditional sounds. Think Afrobeat ukulele, Indian-style ragas on a soprano, or Celtic reels on a tenor. This cross-cultural pollination is expanding the instrument's repertoire in exciting ways. Education and community. The ukulele's low barrier to entry makes it a perfect tool for music education. Schools worldwide are adopting it as a first instrument, and online platforms like Ukulele Underground and Fender's ukulele tutorials ensure that anyone with an internet connection can learn. Pop culture presence. With cameo appearances in movies, commercials, and viral TikTok videos, the ukulele is becoming a cultural shorthand for feel-good. Expect more brands to leverage its sunny reputation in advertising. In short, the ukulele is poised to stay relevant, maybe even grow, into the next decade. It's small, it's friendly, and it's incredibly adaptable. That's a recipe for longevity. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the ukulele world, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment with your favorite ukulele song, and share it with friends who could use a little more sunshine in their lives. Subscribe to the What Is channel and hit the bell icon so you'll never miss our next explorer's guide to the fascinating world of music, science, and culture. Thanks for hanging out with us. Now go strum something. Bonus fact. Here's a little nugget to impress your fellow ukulele enthusiasts at your next jam session. The world's largest ukulele ensemble consisted of 1,247 players who gathered in Japan in 2019 and performed together, setting a Guinness World Record. That's a whole lot of aloha in one place. See you next time. Imagine you're 17 years old in 1975. You're working at a burger joint, making minimum wage, watching your future dissolve into a fog of grease and regret. Every song on the radio sounds like it's been engineered by a committee to make you feel absolutely nothing. And then, somewhere between flipping a patty and scrubbing a grill, you hear it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 chords, 47 seconds. A voice that sounds like it's being choked through a megaphone. And suddenly, you realize, everything you've been told about music, about society, about what it means to be a functioning human being, that's all a lie. You can make your own music. You can say F you to the system. You can scream. That moment, that specific, visceral, life-altering moment, is punk rock. And today, we're going to explore what exactly that means, where it came from, why it mattered, how it changed the world, and why, today, it's more relevant than ever. This is What Is Punk Rock? Let's dive in. Origins. To understand punk rock, you need to understand what it was reacting against. And honestly, it was reacting against just about everything in the mid-1970s. By the early to mid-70s, rock and roll had become bloated. Prog rock was king. Bands were releasing 12-minute songs about fantasy novels. Rock stars were living in mansions, doing lines of cocaine, and forgetting that they were supposed to represent something other than excess. The whole thing had become a bloated, self-important beast. Enter the proto-punks. Now here's where it gets interesting, because there's always this debate about who was first. You've got the New York Dolls, glam rockers from Manhattan, who dressed in women's clothing and played Chuck Berry covers, with a swagger that made everyone uncomfortable. You've got the Stooges from Michigan, led by a guy named Iggy Pop, who literally used broken glass as a microphone, and once had to be hospitalized after rolling in enough pyro to set the stage on fire. You've also got MC5 out of Detroit, actual revolutionaries who were explicitly political and wanted to burn the whole thing down. But here's the thing, none of these bands were punk rock yet. They were just rock bands who were too loud, too fast, and too dangerous for mainstream radio. Then came 1975, and everything changed. There's a club in New York City called CBGB. It stands for Country Bluegrass Blues, which is hilarious because absolutely no one who played there was playing country, bluegrass, or blues. It was a toilet. I'm sorry, but it literally smelled like pee. The sound system was held together by duct tape and prayers. But in 1975, a band called Ramones walked in and changed everything. The Ramones were four guys from Queens who all had the same haircut and wore leather jackets. Their songs were 2 minutes, 47 seconds maximum. They had exactly one chord progression, and they used it in every single song. And somehow, impossibly, that was the point. 1, 2, 3, 4. 22 songs in a set. No encore because they didn't have enough songs for an encore. And everyone who saw them thought, I can do that. And then they did. This is the crucial moment. This is the origin of punk rock. Not a sound, but a realization. If the Ramones could do it, anyone could do it. You didn't need to be a virtuoso. You didn't need to go to music school. You didn't need anyone's permission. Across the Atlantic, something similar was happening in London. In London, a kid named John Lydon walked into a club called the 100 Club in 1975 with a band called the Sex Pistols. Now, John Lydon was not what you'd call traditionally photogenic. He had green hair, braces on his teeth, and an expression that suggested he just smelled something terrible. Which, honestly, he probably had, because London in 1975 was not a pleasant place. The Sex Pistols had one single, Anarchy in the UK. The BBC banned it. The BBC banned an anthem about anarchy. That's how you know you're onto something. Antichrist, Antichrist. The song opens with a guitar riff that sounds like someone tuning a radio, then launches into what is essentially a 3-minute tantrum about the failure of British society. And it became legendary. It became a calling card. It became proof that you could take the worst parts of being young in the 1970s. The unemployment, the hopelessness, the sense that the system had failed you, and turn it into art. So here's your origin story. Punk rock was born in two cities simultaneously, in the mid-1970s, as a reaction against bloated rock and roll, and a society that had nothing to offer young people. It was about simplicity, about immediacy, about the radical idea that you didn't need permission to make music. But that was just the beginning. Development. Alright, so we've established that punk rock was born in 1975. But here's what's fascinating. By 1978, the whole thing was already fragmenting into different directions. That's incredibly fast. That's basically a musical genus evolving over the course of 3 generations. And this is where things get really interesting. Because punk didn't just stay punk, it became 100 different things simultaneously. Let's start with the obvious. The original punks, the Ramones, the Pistols, the Clash, they either burned out or got signed and went mainstream. And that's when the splits happened. In Los Angeles, a scene was emerging that would become hardcore. And hardcore was, well, it was punk rock but faster. Much faster. Like so fast that some songs were less than a minute. The bands were playing at a tempo that made the original punk stuff sound like elevator music. Now here's something that might surprise you. Black Flag, the iconic hardcore band, was started by a guy named Henry Rollins, who was originally from Washington, D.C., and had absolutely no business being in a band. He was a bodybuilder. He worked at a gym. He had a voice that sounded like a diesel engine being fed through a blender. And he was absolutely perfect. Hardcore developed its own culture, its own fashion, straight edge, military boots, short hair, its own ethics, its own venues, smaller, seedier, more dangerous. It was punk rock stripped down to its absolute essentials, turned up to 11 and played at a tempo that was physically exhausting. On the East Coast, you had Minor Threat out of DC, the band that literally invented the term straight edge. Ian MacKaye was 16 years old when he wrote Straight Edge. 16. And he was writing lyrics about staying sober, staying away from drugs, staying true to yourself, in the middle of the Reagan era, when "Just Say No" was the most hypocritical slogan in American politics. This is the thing about punk development. It wasn't just about music, it was about creating entire subcultures, entire value systems, entire ways of being. Meanwhile, in the UK, punk was evolving differently. You had bands like Joy Division, who were too sad for punk but too punk for mainstream, creating this dark, atmospheric sound that would eventually become post-punk. You had The Clash becoming politically explicit, writing songs about racism, about housing, about the IRA. You had The Damned, originally a silly band, essentially a glam band with a political agenda, going to America and essentially inventing goth. They came back from their first American tour wearing eyeliner and women's clothes and basically said, "Actually, we want to be Bauhaus now." The point is, punk rock didn't develop in a straight line. It developed like a virus, mutating, adapting, infecting different sounds and different scenes. And then there's pop punk. Now here's where people get heated, because there's an ongoing argument about whether pop punk is real punk. The answer is, obviously yes, but let's talk about why. Pop punk was the commercialization of punk aesthetics for mainstream consumption. Green Day, Rancid, The Offspring, they all took the three-chord simplicity of the Ramones and added melody. Added hooks, made it radio-friendly. Was this a betrayal? Some people would say yes. Others would say, no, this is exactly what punk was always supposed to be. Music for everyone, not just for the in-crowd. We'll get into this debate more later. But the key thing is, by the mid-1980s, punk rock had already fractured into a dozen different subgenres, each one claiming to be the true punk, each one convinced that their way was the only way. If you're enjoying this deep dive into punk rock, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We've got plenty more What Is episodes coming your way. There's a whole world to explore, and you can be part of it. Alright, back to it, and next let's look at style, music, and culture. Alright, let's talk about what punk rock actually sounds like. What does it look like? And more importantly, what does it mean? Because here's the thing, punk rock isn't just a genre of music, it's a complete aesthetic, a complete philosophy, a complete way of life, and that makes it both fascinating and notoriously difficult to define. Let's start with the sound. The basic punk rock song is simple. 3 chords, maximum. Usually less. The Ramones had 1 chord progression, 1, and they used it in 40 songs. The structure is verse, chorus, verse. No 12-bar blues, no extended solos, no prog rock wankery. The average punk song is between 90 seconds and 3 minutes. If you're not done by 3 minutes, you're doing it wrong. The production is lo-fi, deliberately lo-fi. The early punk records sound like they were recorded in a bathroom, which honestly, some of them were. The point was, you didn't need a studio. You didn't need expensive equipment. You could record in your garage. You could record in a basement. You could record in a warehouse. The tempo is fast. Ideally, as fast as humanly possible without the song collapsing into noise. The classic punk beat is called blast beat, where the drummer plays the snare as fast as they can, essentially just hitting it over and over and over again. It's not groovy, it's not sophisticated, it's primal. And here's something interesting. The punk rock bass sound is almost always prominent. Sometimes it's just following the guitar. Sometimes it's doing something weird and melodic, but it's always there. It's part of the backbone. Now let's talk about how punk rock looks. Because, and this is important, punk has always been about visual rebellion. The classic punk look is leather jacket, jeans, boots, safety pins holding things together, spiky hair, mohawks if you're really committed. But here's what's fascinating. Punk fashion was never about looking good. It was about looking dangerous. It was about scaring your parents. It was about making a statement that said, I don't respect your values. I don't respect your rules. I don't respect your society. This is maybe the most important part. Punk rock is defined by its ethics, not just its sound. And the central punk ethic is DIY, do it yourself. If you want to make a record, you start your own label. You book your own shows, you print your own t-shirts, you make your own zines, you distribute your own music. You don't need MTV, you don't need major labels, you don't need anyone's permission. This is huge. This is actually revolutionary, in the most literal sense. Punk rock said, the system doesn't work for us, so we're building our own system. And this is why punk matters beyond just music. It's why punk has influenced fashion, and art, and film, and literature, and politics. It's a template for rebellion in any field. Punk is also defined by what it's against. It's anti-corporate, anti-authority, anti-establishment, everything is fine the way it is. And this is where punk gets complicated. Because anti-establishment can mean anything from I hate the government, to I think we should burn everything down, to I just want to wear a leather jacket and listen to loud music. And that's okay. Punk has always been inclusive in its exclusivity. You can be punk and be into completely different things. The only requirement is that you reject the idea that you have to do what you're told. Here's a fact. Punk rock invented the indie record label. Before punk, the music industry was completely controlled by major labels. After punk, there were hundreds of tiny labels releasing music by bands that would never have gotten signed otherwise. Punk invented the fanzine, the idea that you could write about music yourself, without permission, without credentials, without being part of the establishment. Punk invented the idea of the venue, that you could take an empty space, call it a club, and book bands yourself. Punk rock was about taking control of your own culture, and that's why it matters. Notable acts, songs, and moments. Okay, let's get to the good stuff, the songs, the bands, the moments that define the genre. Now here's the thing, I could talk about punk rock for hours, and I have been known to, but if I had to pick the essential moments, the essential songs, the essential acts, here's where I'd start. Let's start with the song that started everything. Blitzkrieg Bop by the Ramones, released in 1976. 1 minute and 47 seconds. 22 words in the entire song, more or less. Hey, ho, let's go, is essentially the entire lyrical content, and it's the most influential song in rock and roll history. I'm not exaggerating. Every pop-punk song, every melodic hardcore song, everything that came after, it's all built on Blitzkrieg Bop. The reason it matters, it's the proof of concept. It's the demonstration that you don't need to be a virtuoso. You don't need complicated chords, you don't need expensive equipment, you just need 3 chords and something to say. Now let's talk about the song that terrified the establishment. Anarchy in the UK by the Sex Pistols. This song was banned by the BBC. It was banned by most radio stations. It was considered so dangerous that it couldn't be played in public without risking legal consequences. And here's the funny thing. The song is actually kind of a mess. It's out of tune in places. Johnny Rotten can't hold a note to save his life. The production is chaotic. But that's the point. That's exactly the point. It's supposed to sound like a breakdown of civilization. It's supposed to sound like something is going wrong. It's supposed to make you uncomfortable. This is punk rock as assault. This is punk rock as political statement. This is punk rock saying, we are not going to play by your rules. Now let's talk about the song that proved punk could be art, London Calling by The Clash. This is 4 minutes and 39 seconds. That's basically an epic in punk terms. It's got a bass solo, it's got a guitar solo, it's got lyrics about nuclear war, about racism, about the state of British society. And it's universally considered one of the greatest songs in rock and roll history. Not just punk rock and roll history. The reason it matters, it proved that punk could have depth. It proved that you could be political without being stupid. It proved that punk could be ambitious. Let's talk about the song that started American hardcore. Nervous Breakdown by Black Flag. 1 minute and 39 seconds. The entire thing is basically a scream. It's about anxiety. It's about feeling trapped. It's about the specific terrible feeling of being young and being overwhelmed by the world. And it changed everything. Within a year of this song being released, there was a whole underground hardcore scene in Los Angeles. There were dozens of bands. There were hundreds of shows. There were thousands of kids who had somewhere to go. This is what punk does. It gives people a place. Now let's talk about the moment punk went mainstream. Dookie by Green Day. Released in 1994. It sold over 10 million copies. It produced 4 singles. It launched Green Day into becoming one of the biggest rock bands in the world. And here's the thing. People still argue about whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. Did punk sell out? Did punk become what it was fighting against? Did it lose its edge? The answer is complicated. The truth is, Dookie brought punk to a whole new audience. It made punk accessible. It made it okay to like punk without being an outsider. And honestly, that's what punk was always supposed to do. The Ramones wanted to be on the radio. The Clash wanted to be famous. Punk was never supposed to be an exclusive club. Let's talk about a moment that didn't involve a specific song. The 1976 Summer of Sonics. This was when 3 bands, the Ramones, the Sex Pistols, and the Damned, all played the same club in London within the space of a few months. It was the moment when punk rock became a scene. It was the moment when separate bands in separate cities realized they were all part of the same thing. This is historically significant because it proves punk wasn't manufactured. It wasn't a record company invention. It was a grassroots movement that happened simultaneously in multiple places. Let's end with a moment that's both hilarious and perfectly punk. The Sex Pistols boat trip on the Thames in 1977. The Sex Pistols were hired to play a boat party to celebrate Queen Elizabeth's Silver Jubilee. They showed up late. They were visibly drunk and high. They played for 15 minutes before the police shut them down. Then they went up on deck and threw their equipment into the river. This is punk rock in its purest form, deliberately provocative, deliberately self-destructive, completely out of control. And it was perfect. The future. So we've talked about where punk came from. We've talked about how it developed. We've talked about the sounds, the styles, the culture. We've talked about the songs and the bands and the moments. Now here's the question. Where is punk rock going? And honestly, this is the hardest question to answer because punk rock has always been about the present. It's about what's happening right now. It's about reacting against what's around you. But here's what I can tell you. Punk rock is not dead. Punk rock is not over. Punk rock is more alive than ever, just in different places, in different forms. Let's talk about what's happening in punk right now. You have bands like Idols from Bristol, post-punk, but with a sense of humor, but with a political message. You have bands like GEL from New Jersey, hardcore, but weirder, more experimental. You have bands like Squid, art rock, but with the DIY ethos, with the anti-establishment values. The point is, punk has never been about a specific sound. It's about a specific attitude, and that attitude is more relevant than ever today. Here's something interesting. Almost every modern genre has punk DNA in it. Hip-hop has the DIY ethos. EDM has the make-it-yourself philosophy. Even pop music has the rebellion, the anti-establishment values, the sense that you don't need permission. Punk invented the idea that you could make music without going through the system. And in an era where everyone has a recording studio in their pocket, that's more relevant than ever. So where is punk going? Here's my prediction. Punk is going to keep mutating. It's going to keep evolving. It's going to keep adapting to whatever new system arises that young people need to rebel against. In the 1970s, it was corporate rock and political disillusionment. In the 1980s, it was Reagan-era conservatism. In the 1990s, it was the alternative rock mainstream. In the 2000s, it was the digital revolution. In the 2010s, it was social media and political polarization. What's punk going to react against in the 2020s? My guess? AI, climate change, economic inequality, the sense that the system is completely broken. Whatever it is, punk will be there, screaming about it, making it uncomfortable, making it personal. Here's the thing, punk rock will always be relevant, because there will always be young people who feel like the system doesn't work for them. There will always be people who feel alienated, marginalized, ignored. There will always be people who want to scream. And that's what punk offers. A voice, a community, a way to say, I'm here, I'm angry, I'm not going away. That's the future of punk. It's not a genre, it's not a fashion, it's not a decade, it's an attitude that will never go out of style. So what is punk rock? Punk rock is the realization that you can do it yourself. It's the radical idea that you don't need permission. It's the belief that your voice matters, that your art matters, that your anger is valid. It's 4 chords and a scream. It's a leather jacket and a safety pin. It's a basement show in a warehouse. It's a kid in their bedroom making a record on a 4-track. It's the most important movement in rock and roll history. And it's not over. Hopefully you've learned something about where punk rock came from, what it means, and why it still matters. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to subscribe to What Is and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Now before we go, here's your bonus fact. Did you know that the most streamed punk song on Spotify is actually American Idiot by Green Day? It has over 2 billion streams. That's more than every Ramones song combined, more than every Sex Pistols song combined, more than almost any classic punk track you can think of. And honestly, that's kind of perfect. Because punk was always about reaching as many people as possible. It was about saying, you don't need to be part of the in crowd. You don't need permission. You can do this too. 2 billion streams. That's the sound of a kid in their bedroom, screaming into a guitar, saying, I matter. That's punk rock.